Everything around you is holding its breath. Not in fear, but in reverence. You're not just evolving, you're molting out of an entire lifetime's worth of misalignment. In the coming days, your old patterns will disintegrate like forgotten blueprints, and something outrageous will start forming in their place. It won't be subtle. The mirror will argue with you. The voice in your head will sound wiser. And the air around you? It'll feel like it's been waiting for your arrival. This isn't luck. It's orchestration. Something beyond time has been arranging invisible scaffolding around your life, quietly, patiently, divinely. And just before this next chapter turns its first page, you'll sense a disruption in the atmosphere. Not chaos, but calibration. Like your spirit is shifting gears without telling your body. If it feels like déjà vu mixed with emotional whiplash, that's because the universe has done this with you before. But never at this intensity. You may notice strangers watching you longer than usual. Conversations will end abruptly when you enter rooms. It's not suspicion, it's recognition. Even if they can't explain it, something about your presence announces change. Money will show up where it used to disappear. Time will stretch for you where it once collapsed. These aren't coincidences, they're confirmations. If your heart overflows with God's blessings, let that love shine. Click the super thank you button and give $40 or more to plant seeds of faith that will impact countless lives. Your generosity reflects His abundance. Be a vessel of His grace and watch His kingdom flourish through you. Your nervous system is recalibrating for the life your soul always expected. You might feel tired at odd hours, energized in quiet moments, or emotionally raw without a trigger. That's the shedding. That's the rewiring. You're not falling apart, you're finally syncing with the architecture that was always coded into your DNA but buried under survival mode. Let it rise. The next 30 days aren't a countdown, they're a build-up. Like thunder before the lightning strike. Like silence before the curtain lifts. You won't need to announce this shift. It'll be seen. It'll be felt. And when the smoke clears, even you won't recognize the version of yourself standing in the aftermath, because they'll be that remarkable. The kind of remarkable that doesn't need a spotlight, because it glows on contact. Every fractured connection left behind was never meant to follow you into this version of yourself. The distance you created wasn't cruelty, it was calibration. Not a single bond was cut in vain. Some names now feel like static when spoken aloud. Others don't even register as memory. That chapter of tolerating what quietly dismantled your spirit has ended. And if anyone dared to reattach themselves to your rise, they'd find that the doors no longer recognize their fingerprints. There's an echo now when you move through space. Something almost invisible, but unmistakable, precedes you, an imprint in the unseen. It's not charisma. It's not presence. It's recalibration at the cellular level. The blueprint they once knew no longer exists. Interactions feel rewired. The atmosphere thickens before you speak. Strangers react like they've brushed against a thunderstorm that hasn't happened yet. That's what it feels like when frequency shifts. What they called delusion was actually devotion, to something greater, to something true. While they performed for applause in the valley, you walked alone into thinner air, trusting an unseen summit. And now that you've arrived, even you can feel the pressure change. Their old rules don't apply here. Their ridicule doesn't reach this altitude. And what once terrified you about isolation now feels like divine insulation, blessed by His grace. Click super thank you and give $20 to spread His light. Your gift plants seeds that grow His kingdom. Be the blessing. Every denial you once internalized is unraveling. Every setback was reverse engineered for your visibility. Rejection redirected you toward resurrection. And soon, even the environments that silenced you will become platforms that amplify you. You will return to the very spaces that dismissed your voice, only this time, not as an outsider, but as the one the room bends toward. Not to be welcomed, but to take command. Entire dynamics are collapsing without warning. Not because you wished harm on anyone, but because the weight they carried couldn't pass through the next gate. This unraveling isn't yours to fix or mourn, it's the result of deeper forces clearing blockages you couldn't fully see. These departures weren't personal. They were precise removals. There's no apology required for walking forward when the path behind you is already fading into myth. A wave of clarity is washing through your spirit, flooding every corner that once held doubt. The world feels strangely generous all of a sudden, offering beauty in moments that used to feel empty. The difference isn't in the world. It's in your capacity to receive. The life you kept visualizing while everyone mocked your hope. It's assembling piece by piece, without effort. And the awe you feel isn't shock, it's the return of what you never stopped believing could arrive. Some connections are now mirroring your expansion, meeting your honesty with their own, matching your evolution with theirs. Others, however, can barely breathe in the atmosphere you now require. The discomfort they feel is their soul's response to truth. They don't hate you, they fear the reflection you offer. Their unease is a symptom of a timeline they were never meant to follow. That vibration? That separation doing its job. At one point, you believed them. That you were too much. Too sensitive. Too hopeful. They told you the dreams were unrealistic, your instincts unreliable, your presence inconvenient. They masked their envy as concern. They named their fear as logic. But instead of breaking, you became flame-resistant. Every word meant to shame you became fuel for the becoming. What they didn't know was that every misfire they aimed only hammered you into something sharper. Now, as balance returns, the scales tilt in full view, and no one can say they didn't see it coming. Long before anything tangible showed up, there was already a richness in motion. Not the kind counted in coins, but in composure. Each step forward was laced with intention. Every gaze, every gesture, calculated from a place of quiet knowing. The illusion of wealth wasn't meant to deceive, it was a promise made to the self, to act like the blessing was already here, even when the cupboards echoed empty. Every scar became part of the architecture. The climb wasn't scenic, it was surgical. While some played at adventure from safe distances, a few took the road that demanded pieces of their identity as payment. Each layer stripped away left the essentials, the resilient core that would rather risk everything than live beneath its potential. And now that clarity sharpens the view from the top, the noise from below can no longer distort the truth. The breaking points didn't come with announcements. They arrived in the form of days that felt like endings, nights that whispered abandonment, and hours where breathing became an act of defiance. Yet something unseen kept pulling the thread back into place. Not out of pity, but purpose. The force behind every revival wasn't external. It was a contract written in silence, a refusal to vanish. There were seasons where disappearance felt like the only option. Moments when connection was replaced by stillness, and the world felt like it had forgotten your name. But it was in that cocoon of invisibility that the structure was rewritten. This wasn't about repair, it was about redesign. Every crack exposed a lie that had been living too long inside. Every silence became a sanctuary for rebirth. False loyalty has a scent, and you learned to detect it before it entered the room. Masks fell without force. Performances collapsed under their own weight. Allies revealed themselves not by declarations, but by the choices they made when pressure entered the room. And in those tests, you chose timing that aligned with truth over shortcuts that aligned with comfort. That's what set you apart. The soul wandered, often, through places where shelter was an idea more than a structure. Rest came not from sleep but from rare moments of peace in unfamiliar territory. There were patterns that nearly consumed you, attachments that threatened to reduce your brilliance to survival. But the hardest part wasn't releasing them, it was forgiving yourself for holding on so long. Now, every person who tried to manipulate your story for their benefit is watching from a distance they can't cross. Not because of revenge, but because access was revoked. This next era is reserved. The cost of admission is authenticity. And that's one currency most pretenders never learned how to earn. There were crossroads where approval dangled like bait, where the offer was clear: shrink and belong, or stand and be alone. You declined the invitation to fold. Not once did you trade authenticity for convenience. Even when silence cost you connections, even when the room emptied out, the vow remained intact: no dilution, no disguise, no distortion. That decision didn't go unnoticed. They brought stories to your doorstep like couriers of concern, but their motives were tainted. Cloaked in false empathy, they delivered venom in velvet boxes, curious more about your collapse than your clarity. They called it honesty, but their eyes betrayed the hunger for fallout. Their twisted loyalty was never about warning you, it was always about watching you squirm. The shift you're about to feel isn't subtle. It's the type of change that recalibrates reality itself. Numbers won't just rise, they'll roar. The long drought is cracking open. What's entering your life now isn't luck, it's collected proof of every time you stayed faithful when your reflection didn't recognize itself. This is restoration, not reward. But don't get it twisted, the material gain is only the surface. What's really arriving is the full broadcast of your frequency, no longer distorted by interference. The quiet upgrades have built to this crescendo. Those who sought to hijack your glow never even knew the signal they were trying to intercept was encoded. What's being delivered now was sealed until betrayal expired. Delay was never punishment, it was a shield. A reroute away from entrapment dressed as support. The hesitation of blessings was a firewall to ensure no opportunist could drain what was meant to restore. Timing didn't fail you. It insulated you. Some would have siphoned the harvest and left you starving in the aftermath. They smiled through their sabotage, hoping to be close enough to benefit without ever matching your integrity. But grace doesn't reward proximity, it rewards alignment. And theirs was always off-key. Now the gates are opening, and only those who resonated with your silence will be present for your sound. What's coming isn't just abundance, it's divine design unveiled in full view. The ones who played neutral during your drought will soon realize they were never written into the script for the season that's about to unfold. Stability is starting to feel romantic. The glow you radiate now doesn't chase approval, it reflects devotion to your own joy. That's why something beautiful is on the horizon, not to fill a void, but to meet you where you've already become full. This next love isn't about completing anything, it's about mirroring the wonder you've already reclaimed. What's forming is a bond not born from desperation, but clarity. And it walks in when chaos finally walks out. True abundance reveals itself not through accumulation, but by sharpening your filter. Giving now feels different. There's a sacred silence before each decision, where intuition checks intention before your hands release anything. You've tasted the exhaustion that comes from trying to rescue those who recycle their own misery. Now you know, generosity has to be led by alignment, not guilt. Every interaction becomes a revelation. It's no longer about who's around, it's about what surfaces when they are. Something about your presence activates unspoken truths. The moment they get close, their hidden motives show up first. Not because you asked, but because your energy scans what words try to hide. Consequences come quickly now, not to punish, but to balance the space you walk through. Retribution is unfolding on timelines you never touched. The shift in their lives isn't your responsibility, it's gravity catching up. The same force that held you through storms is now returning every seed planted in deception. While your elevation feels like destiny fulfilled, theirs feels like mirrors cracking under truth. Not because you retaliated, but because nature does not ignore intention. Some alliances were never built on resonance, just resentment. Temporary partnerships formed in the shadows, bonded not by loyalty, but by mutual envy. The strange part? These groups didn't even like each other until your rise gave them something to agree on. But false unity collapses fast. They underestimated what it means to challenge someone who's not fueled by validation, but by vision. What once felt like rejection now looks like redirection in disguise. Had you received acceptance from the wrong crowd, your growth would have been bartered away for comfort. Now that the stage is set for something extraordinary, the background noise fades, and only those with matching frequencies can enter the frame. The chapter ahead isn't just romance or wealth or clarity, it's all of them, at once, arriving in ways that feel effortless because you stopped chasing what never deserved you. And now, what's truly meant is on its way, right on time, because you finally stopped waiting and started becoming. Aligned souls are being pulled into your orbit. Not by coincidence, but by silent design. Strangers who feel strangely familiar. Allies who speak your language without needing a translator. Paths are crossing at strangely perfect intervals, all choreographed behind the veil. Lateness can't afford to exist here. Precision is now a portal. What's coming next hinges on your willingness to be exactly where your spirit nudges you to be. Ideas are forming faster than words. Insight arrives before questions. Your senses are syncing with timelines you haven't walked yet, offering clues like breadcrumbs from the future. What once felt like effort now unfolds like instinct. Your perception is not just expanding, it's collapsing old systems of limitation. Life is beginning to reveal its hidden mechanics, and you're playing the game from the command center now. Realness has become your calling card. Artificial energy doesn't survive in your field anymore. The version of you that once performed for safety has retired. You no longer need permission to exist in fullness. People who meet you now feel invited into their own healing just by standing near your truth. That's the kind of presence you carry. Your presence has outgrown language. People can't explain why they feel seen, challenged, or undone in your energy, but they do. You've entered the realm where silence says more than noise ever could. Eyes follow, voices falter, and the space adjusts itself before you even speak. You walk like someone who knows this timeline was sculpted with you in mind. There's no going back to the version of you that overexplained or entertained confusion. Not because you're angry, but because your peace is now precision engineered. Every interaction is weighed before access is granted. You don't entertain threats in disguise or chaos wearing charm. What stands in front of you now must match your evolution or dissolve on contact. Opportunities are approaching wrapped as people. But not everyone gets to stay. What feels like rejection to them is actually a form of divine sorting. The more aligned you become, the more obvious misalignment looks. The spotlight you carry doesn't just illuminate, it reveals intentions that can't hide under charm anymore. This is more than protection. It's refinement. The doors that open now are keyed to your vibration alone. No one gets in by proximity. Only resonance grants passage. Every part of your reality is being cleansed, not to isolate you, but to prepare a seat at a table where only purpose is served. Those who once held false power are unraveling under their own decisions. They played roles in systems meant to erase you, belittle you, outmaneuver you, but none of their strategies survived what they couldn't predict, your alignment. While they whispered behind your back, You were receiving instructions not from ego, but from something eternal. That's what they never saw coming. Privacy became your sanctuary when visibility attracted distortion. You no longer broadcast evolution, you protect it. Not from fear, but from wisdom. Your movements are calculated, not to be elusive, but to honor the sacredness of timing. Aspirations that were once shared too soon are now sheltered until they mature into undeniable reality. Every intention you hold has been reinforced with persistence no one imagined you could maintain. Doubt was their favorite tool, expecting you to fold when nothing moved. But you didn't need external proof to stay loyal to what your spirit already confirmed. You didn't show up halfway. You built from scratch. You rebuilt through setbacks. And you're still rising, brick by unseen brick. Financial limitation is no longer your storyline. What once blocked the flow has been exposed for what it was, conditioning passed down through wounded belief systems. You've dismantled the notion that being depleted is somehow noble. You now recognize that resources multiply impact, and wealth in your hands becomes a catalyst, not an indulgence. Abundance no longer feels foreign, it feels natural. Because it's not just about comfort, it's about capacity. It's about having the reach to uplift what matters and the freedom to say no without apology. The shift in your external world mirrors the internal liberation that took years to cultivate. Now, generosity pours from a full vessel, not a fractured one. Your story has always been rooted in contrast, the mistreatment versus the mission, the betrayal versus the blueprint. But now, the imbalance is correcting itself. Those who ignored the sacred within you are now witnessing the cost of dismissal. And the higher you rise, the clearer their descent becomes, not from vengeance, but from the mathematics of energy. None of this happened by chance. You're standing where you are because you refused to make peace with limits disguised as loyalty. And now, as justice unfolds in its own language, your focus stays on what's ahead, because you don't need front row seats to a downfall you never requested. You weren't built to bend in the face of manipulation. There's something deeply ancient about your wiring, unshakable by influence, untouched by fear. Systems designed to silence truth-tellers were never going to hold you. Not because you screamed louder, but because you stayed rooted while everything else tried to shift your axis. That's why your presence unsettles illusions and unlocks courage in those ready to remember who they are. Your energy now acts like a filter. The ones meant for your path arrive with clarity in their spirit, not performance on their lips. Those still pretending can't keep up. Imitators are exhausting themselves trying to mimic what was never technique, but embodiment. They wrap performance in spiritual language and hope no one notices the lack of depth, but your vibration burns through the act before they even speak. The transformation is undeniable. Every room you enter tilts slightly when you arrive. They feel it in how you speak, how you move, how you remain unbothered by spectacle. The shift wasn't cosmetic, it was cellular. You didn't just change how you look. You peeled away what never belonged in the first place. Now your essence is uninterrupted, and that's what stops people in their tracks. This awakening was the crossing point, the moment when survival became sovereignty. You're no longer reactive. You're strategic. No longer surviving battles, but orchestrating outcomes. You fight now not to prove your power, but to protect what's sacred. And those still trying to manipulate their way to influence find themselves lost in a game you stopped playing. The invitations to regress are increasing, but so is your refusal. Old scripts don't fit your voice anymore. Even when the past disguises itself as safety, it doesn't fool you. You've broken the loop. Even solitude feels better than returning to cycles that required you to shrink. You've tasted a life where peace isn't fragile, and you won't trade it for anything. They're panicking because they've realized the blueprint can't be stolen. The more they try to force your path onto their timeline, the more friction they create. They don't understand that your results aren't replicable because the foundation was built in silence, through trial, tears, and truth. What's manifesting for you now is protected by layers they can't penetrate. What you're walking into is coded to respond only to your voice, your rhythm, your alignment. That's why their mimicry fails. The throne was built for one. And no matter how close they stand, they'll never sit in what was carved from your evolution. Let them try. It only highlights the difference. Your rise isn't accidental. You've been trusted with elevation because you use it as a bridge, not a trophy. Every time something good reaches your hands, you convert it into hope for those still climbing. This is why doors keep opening without you having to knock. You're not here to hoard blessings, you're here to replicate impact. The reason your road took longer is because the foundation had to be deeper. There were layers to break through, wires to rewire, myths to unlearn. You were asked to build in silence while others were allowed shortcuts. But now that your ascent is complete, it's clear the slow route gave you wings they'll never grow. And now that you're standing where few survive, the view hits different. What once felt too far now fits like it was always yours. The expansion coming isn't just comfort, it's the universe handing over evidence that your endurance was never in vain. What's arriving will dissolve survival mode completely. Not just because you waited, but because you matured while waiting. Not just because you believed, but because you refused to break while believing. You're entering a space where you no longer have to explain your worth. Resources will flow not just to you, but through you, because you're no longer operating from lack. You're stepping into the level where purpose becomes permission. Your yes to your calling just unlocked access for others to say yes to theirs. The celebration hits harder when you remember what silence used to feel like. You cherish this momentum because you've known stillness that felt like abandonment. But you never stopped showing up. And now every tool you forged in the fire is ready to be used. This isn't your reward, it's your platform. The falling away isn't coincidence. The path had to be cleared for those whose presence enhances your mission, not complicates it. What's rising in your finances, your circles, your energy, isn't just growth, it's alignment. And the next version of your life will reflect everything that's been prepared behind the curtain. All of it, the delay, the confusion, the tension, was setting the exact rhythm of your launch. You were being timed to arrive when the world would be ready to receive the full force of your evolution. And in just weeks, everything that once felt unanswered will fall into place, not because you forced it, but because you trusted the process long enough to let it complete.